Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I am putting together one upload, but I have to make two intros. The first intro is going to be for the video that I hope stays out and does not get taken down by YouTube. I'm going to share with you some very terrifying video evidence and survivor detail accounts from Nightmare Hall. Found this very deep in the internet. It's quite scary. It's quite terrifying. And I attached a very terrifying Dogman encounter with it as well, just in case it does get taken down. But needless to say, I want this video and hope this video stays up. But before that, let's get into some links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and please, folks, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Like I said, encounter, then video. I'm going to try to hide it in here so hopefully it doesn't flag anything, but let's get into it. Just so that you have an idea of my background, knowledge, and experience, I grew up all over the rural southern United States, from the Appalachian Mountains to the swamps, backwoods, and bayous of the deep south, where I spent most of my free time deep in the woods up until my early 20s. I spent a lot of my time hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, and always felt at home and peace miles from nowhere. The more remote, the better. I'm well educated. I have a degree in the field of science and have seen various types of wildlife like coyote, wolves, panthers, and bear in the wild. When I was about 17 years old, my family moved to the Florida Panhandle. The woods in that area and around my house went on for many, many miles, and are only interrupted by the occasional creek, river, country road, or farm. There really are many miles of woods to see, very little traffic out there. I was told by the locals that the area around my house had special significance to the Native Americans, and on a few occasions, people alluded to things being odd in the area, but no one ever told me about anything specific. If anything, the few who seemed to know anything got weird and quiet if I pressed them about why they made remarks about the woods. So I dismissed it and lived my outdoor life as I normally would. On one occasion, some friends came over to our property and we decided to go camping. We went down by one of the creek bottoms a mile behind the house and hung out for a while, but after remembering all the water moccasins that hang out down there, I decided against camping out there out of concern that I may get bitten by a snake in the dark. There are lots of cottonmouth down there, and they become more active at night. So around dusk, I and another kid went back to my house, and the other two were going to camp out there for the night. Probably an hour after dark, the other two showed up shaken. They said they were going to sleep inside as well. They seemed spooked, but when I asked them if something was wrong, they got weird and clammed up. Next day, we went back to the creek bottom and goofed around and do teenage stuff. One of my friends had brought his rifle, which seemed eager to try it out. It was one of those old Chinese SKSs. We were messing around the campsite they had abandoned the night before when one of them commented about seeing something that looked like an invisible thing from the movie The Predator. I thought they were being silly, but they were insistent, so we looked around and saw nothing. A little while later, the friend with the rifle fired a shot up into the trees, which was immediately followed by a huge splash in the creek. When I looked at the creek, I saw a large wave from the impact, like someone had thrown something very large into it with a lot of force. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something brown and blurry in the creek, but before my eyes could even focus on it, nothing was there to be seen. Yet, there were waves still moving. It was very weird. I was surprised. I didn't know that he intended to shoot at anything and had been looking the other way. My other friends didn't seem to know what happened either. We asked him what had just happened. I saw a large, hairy thing up on a large limb of that tree and shot it. I know that was absolutely irresponsible of him. I asked him what he had shot. Was it a raccoon or something? No, he said. It looked like something out of a zoo, kind of like a big monkey or something, but it had the face. I don't know, it was looking at me. I must have hit it because it did fall into the creek. All of this happened in less than a minute, and we ran 25 feet over to the creek, where Will had heard the splash. There was still a slight disturbance in the water, but we never saw anything. When questioning the friend, he reiterated what he had seen, a hairy thing that reminded him of something similar to a baboon, looking at him from the top of a large limb of the tree, but, repeated, it had a face, and it was looking at him. I asked, what do you mean it had a face, like a human face? He said, no, it wasn't human, but it didn't look like any animal's face I had ever seen. It didn't look like a monkey's face either. It was different. We searched the banks and looked around, but didn't find anything. We even walked down to the creek a good way to see if he had killed something and it floated away. We never found a thing. No blood, no tracks, no fur. But whatever had happened, he had irresponsibly shot at something, and even if out of surprise, it had fallen into the creek. We never found a sign of it. It was shortly after this that things started to feel very weird, a little eerie, so we called it a day. I never knew what to think of that event, and I think I had written it off as something that just didn't make sense or some kind of crazy, very successful prank. I even asked the other two guys if they were screwing with me, and they swore up and down that they had done nothing. One of them did see him fire the rifle, but didn't know what he was shooting at. He said he saw something fall from his peripheral vision, but when he looked into the creek, there was nothing there. Life continued on as normal, and I spent a lot of my free time hiking, exploring, and looking for fishing holes off in that small creek. At some point after this, I started having weird experiences in the woods periodically. Sometimes, usually late in the day or at dusk, I would get the feeling that I was being watched. The feeling wasn't there most of the time. It would just happen on and off for occasions. I started noticing that sometimes in the evening I would hear strange animal noises from the surrounding woods. A few times it sounded like a blood-curdling scream. Once it sounded like a roar, and a few times it sounded like some type of odd bird-like cry similar to that of a peacock. Being familiar with animals, I always tried to deduce what type of animal made the various noises. I concluded that the screams must be a panther, that the roar must have been a bear, but the peacock noise made no sense. There were 3 neighbors within the next mile and a half on this isolated road, and none of them had peacocks. Then late one evening, I heard more of an intimidating scream than before. It just sounded bizarre and caused a sense of fear and dread. The scream sounded like a woman being murdered. I don't know how else to describe it. It was high-pitched, shrill, and loud, but it seemed too loud and lasted far too long to be a human. I figured it must have been a panther, but it didn't feel right and sent chills down my spine. It was during the last bit of twilight before total darkness, and I hurried my ass back home. Sometime after that, occasional sense of being watched and followed began to feel stronger and more malevolent. On a couple of occasions after that, when I was out in the woods, I felt that I was not only being watched, but I was being hunted, and that my life was in danger. I never saw or heard anything. The woods were always silent when this happened, and I always quickly made my way home, but made it a point to walk, as I felt like running may trigger the predator like a panther to chase me, if that's indeed what it was. Whatever it was, I felt like I was in imminent danger of death. It was a consuming feeling like nothing I had ever felt before. One day during this time, my little brother and his friends came running excitedly up to me and told me that the two of them had seen a bear, being that this area has been heavily hunted for many years, and there were not supposed to be any bears anywhere near this part of Florida. I asked them what they saw. They said that they had turned around and seen the hind end, something on all fours walking into the edge of the forest. They only saw the very end of this creature and could only see the upper part of its back legs and its back right above the legs. They said it was brown and that it had hair and that it was much bigger than a dog, so it must have been a bear. Again, there are no bear known to exist anywhere near here. At some point after this, I was out hiking again one day, and I had made the point to bring my shotgun loaded with number 4 shot, which was the largest pellets I had. I'd begun carrying it while hiking as a precaution to whatever was out there. I was still leaning towards it being a panther. I didn't know what else it could be that would stalk a human and go undetected. I'd noticed that strange feelings and various strange sounds seemed to happen all around dusk or at night, when I had started making the point to be home well before dark. This time, I stayed out far too late. Dusk was beginning as I was making my way home when I felt it again. Something was watching me. No, I felt like something was after me. The level of fear and senses that this thing triggered were completely different from anything I had ever felt before. I knew I was being stalked, but I couldn't see or hear anything as I made my way home. Whatever the thing was, it seemed to move with me as I walked hundreds of yards, but the feeling had only grown stronger. I felt like my life was in peril, like something was about to lunge out and kill me. Every hair on my body stood on end. I felt certain that whatever this thing was, the shotgun was not going to stop it. Despite this terror I was feeling, I forced myself to stop and scan the woods, looking at both the ground and the trees, thinking that I may see a panther nearby, readying itself to pounce. There was nothing that I could see nor hear. Everything was deathly quiet. It was about this time that I first remembered an inner voice saying something like, "Do not stop, go quick, don't run." I started praying as I walked home. In every fiber of my being, I felt the sense of malice and intent. Whatever this was, it wanted to kill me. I felt sheer terror, sheer dread in the way that I felt. Remember, I had grown up in very rural areas full of remote, isolated spots. Those places were where I felt at most peace. Animals didn't scare me, but whatever this was, it did. That feeling was terrifying and consuming. It was all that I could do to just walk home, clutching my useless shotgun and praying to God to protect me. And He did. Usually, when I got within 200 to 300 yards of the house, that feeling would subside. This time, the feeling followed me right up to about 50 yards from the house. I continued praying, and as I reached it, the feeling eased off, but I felt like whatever was there was watching me. From that day on, I started occasionally feeling this malevolent presence from the nearby woods. Sometimes it didn't feel safe in my own yard at night. I remember one time when I walked into the backyard and heard the scream again. It sounded like a woman screaming in terror, only extremely loud and lasted far too long to be a human. And then it transitioned into something like a baby crying, but the crying changed to become more distorted and twisted. It just felt and sounded like something that was wicked was trying to frighten me. From that point on, I avoided the woods, especially while alone in the evenings. I turned to partying and tried to push the events from my mind. A year or two had passed without incident, and I had gotten far too relaxed. Sometimes I get the occasional itch to go for a stroll at night. The moon was mostly full, the sky was clear with lots of stars. It was bright, beautiful early autumn evening. I still had enough apprehension to stay out of the fields and woods, especially alone at night, so I decided to go for a walk down the rural country road. It was probably around midnight. I had walked several hundred yards down that paved road and cut across the corner of someone's cow pasture to get to a dirt road. I had gone through an electric fence and made it about 50 yards through the pasture when I heard something moving in the adjacent cornfield on the opposite side of that dirt road from the pasture. I stopped and listened and heard the sound of something big moving quickly through the rows of corn. At first I thought it may be a deer until I realized that the steps and movements sounded bipedal and large. Sometimes it moved, then paused, then moved through the corn quickly again. After hearing that movement several times, suddenly the sound of the malevolent was followed by a sound of this rabbit squealing. I instinctively crouched, peering into the darkness. Up until this moment, I had only been curious as to what kind of creature I had gotten close to. I had no way of fathoming what was about to step out. What I saw was a large bipedal figure walk out of that cornfield. It crossed the dirt road and stepped over the electric fence mid-stride without pause or effort. In the bright light of the moon and stars, I could make out some detail. Its head had significant wolf-like ears, long snout, and pointed ears. It was taller than a human, maybe 7 feet, possibly a little more. It walked leaning forward, with its shoulders hunched forward. It was slightly crouched. It was covered in hair or fur, but it seemed thinner and shorter on much of its torso and arms. I remember noticing that it was very lean, powerful, muscular build. Its arms seemed unusually long and hung low and moved as if it was clutching something in what appeared to be its long hands. I couldn't make out its color because of the limited light. It just appeared to be dark in color. I never noticed a tail or whether it had double knees. These creatures are often portrayed having. Despite being semi-bright night, a lot of its body from the waist down was obscured in shadows. It crouched on the ground, clenching that rabbit in both hands, and I started hearing wet and crunching noises and realized that it was eating the rabbit. It was squatting low on the ground, holding the rabbit with both hands, eating much like we would eat a fried chicken drumstick and thigh with 2 hands. At this point, I guess it couldn't have been more than 40 yards from me. It's hard to remember details you don't think about at the time many years later. I had on camouflage jacket and jeans, and I remember trying to make myself small while crouching and hoping it did not notice me. When it paused, it sniffed as if it had caught something. Then it raised its head and sniffed the air again. It was at that moment that I thought, crap, I hope it's not smelling my scent. At that moment, it looked directly at me, and this low guttural growl came from its mouth. I swear its eyes flashed red, something that I have never seen an animal do without light reflecting. It was less bright than when a light reflected directly in an animal's eyes, but distinct enough that I could see the red eyes briefly flicker in the darkness. That this didn't appear to be reflecting light. It appeared to be coming from the creature itself for a split second and then disappeared. Bizarre, I know. Looking directly at me, the creature stood up like it was challenging me, growled this low guttural growl that I heard 40 yards away. At the moment, I felt fear overwhelm me. I had this overwhelming urge to haul ass back to my house, but something inside, something told me not to run, that if I did so, it would catch me and kill me. When I previously told you folks about all the times I had felt hunted and felt that sense of unnatural terror, like my life was about to be forfeited in a violent way, well, now it was like I was looking at that source eye to eye. Somehow I knew that this creature was bad, a wicked thing far more powerful than me, and something, like an inaudible voice, kept saying, "Walk, don't run, pray, stay calm." These thoughts kept going through my head, but they were not coming from my conscious mind. I slowly backed out of the field, never turning my back on this creature until briefly when I had to cross the electric fence. Even then I tried not to turn my back completely to it and keep one eye on it. At this point, it had moved deeper into the shadows of the pasture and was moving parallel to the direction that I was going. I would occasionally hear it moving through the field, still staying parallel to me as I began to walk down the paved road towards home. As I moved down that blacktop, I came to a section of woods with no homes or lights nearby. I had to walk through it at least a few hundred yards of wooded road to get back to my house. And there was only one house on the way. No lights anywhere, nothing but woods. The thing tracked alongside of me the whole way, moving through the woods in the darkness with absolute ease. Occasionally I would hear a branch crack or a swish of vegetation, and a few times it stopped to growl, that low guttural growl. It's odd how I could hear that growl. I don't think I would have heard a dog's growling at that distance. The entire time, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, fear, inescapable death. I continued to listen to the internal voice and prayed hard the whole way. It kept telling me to walk, not run, and to pray. I prayed. Oh, did I pray? I don't know if it was a voice or my intuition, but I knew, somehow, with absolute certainty, that if I had ran, that thing was going to kill me. There was something symbolic about the act of fleeing from this evil, and I knew if I did, everything was over. As I walked through that dark, wooded stretch of road, I remember wondering if any of my remains would be found, and if so, what would they claim did it to me? I kept feeling like I was going to be killed at any moment. Time seemed to drag on. It seemed like forever until I got close to the house. I finally reached my driveway and even walked backward up the hill to my house because I did not want to turn my back on it. And sure enough, it was across the road from my house, growling from the edge of that tree line. I finally bolted when I got 10 yards from the door. I ran through the house, locking all the doors and grabbing my old shotgun, even though I felt for certain that the small game loads I had in it would do nothing to this creature. I was too afraid to look out the windows, as I knew it was outside, and feared seeing it looking back at me through the windows. The feeling this thing gave me was not just a dangerous one. It was an evil feeling, like this was a wicked, unnatural thing. I sat in my room and prayed, if memory serves, until dawn broke. A few weeks or months later, sorry I don't remember the specifics, my little sister came downstairs sometime around or after 1 a.m., white as a ghost. She was terrified. You could see it all over her. When I asked my family what was wrong, what was going on, they said she had seen a bear crouched outside of her window. She had woken up terrified and knew something was watching her sleep, and when she looked out the window next to her bed, she saw a bear with large red eyes staring at her. My sister slept in the bedroom on the second floor, but the garage adjoining that part of the house was one story. Something had climbed up onto the roof of the garage and had been intently watching her through the window. I asked her point blank if she was sure it was a bear. I could tell she was terrified and did not want to acknowledge something. She responded with, it was covered in fur and had large red eyes and was staring at me, sleeping through the window. I was asleep. When I woke up with a feeling of terror, I knew something was watching me. It felt like it was bad. I'm paraphrasing, it was many years ago. I was generally too afraid to go back into the woods around the house, but after that, when I did summon courage up, I would periodically have to abruptly stop hiking in the woods near the house. Everything would be fine, and then I would suddenly become overwhelmed with this ominous feeling that I was living on borrowed time, that the creature was stalking me, and that it was going to kill me. I almost always left immediately, feeling like the shotgun in my hands that I was carrying was useless. On multiple times, when I had this feeling, I felt the inner voice again, telling me to leave now, walk, don't run, and pray. On a couple of the occasions that I lingered momentarily to scan the woods for the creature, I never saw anything but I felt it like it grew closer, and the danger grew more closer to me, so I always left. It was around this time that I found someone's white domestic rabbit hanging from a tree branch in the woods, disemboweled with its eyes plucked out. It was hanging from a branch about 5 to 6 feet off the ground. It struck me that it was like I was meant to be seen, and I was supposed to find it. It just seemed significant. It was about that time that I learned the natives lived on a nearby adjacent property who were reputed to use blood magic that was evil and bad. I was told this by another Native American who told me to stay away from them. I'm part Native as well. I lived near a reservation, and multiple Native Americans had told me about someone who is known as a shapeshifter. Someone who had the ability to shift into animals, and they had ties to this family. A few times someone told me something like that. They always acted like it was a taboo thing, and they should not speak of it. I don't know if that's relevant, but it feels like it all may be connected. Years later, a friend of mine came to pick me up from a nearby city. We pulled out of my driveway after midnight, and right down the road from my house we saw a pair of huge wolves standing a few feet from the road, calmly watching us. Even staring at the car from a few feet away as we passed, their presence and behavior seemed and felt very unnatural. My friend, who had grown up here, freaked out. He became pale, sweaty, and started stuttering, telling me, those wolves, those are huge wolves. The only wolves in Florida are red wolves, which almost look like large coyotes. They have reddish-brown coloring and are very small for a wolf. These individuals were silver gray and black. I guess they looked like they could have weighed 240 to 280 pounds. One was smaller than the other, and when I looked at them, I instinctively knew they were a pair, one male, one female. Red wolves are not present anywhere near this part of Florida Panhandle, and this was something entirely different. I questioned my uncle, a state biologist and a huge outdoorsman, and he told me that there are very few red wolves in Florida. They were nowhere near the size, and there were none anywhere near me. Similarly, there weren't any red-eyed, roof-sitting, window-peering bears in the area, as all the bears in the area had been hunted out many years ago. I don't know what the true nature of what I experienced was, but it always left me with a sense that it had a very strong supernatural element. Yeah, these things had physical forms, but there was something more, something supernatural. My friend knew something, but he was so terrified that all he would tell me was there were Native Americans in the area and they took part of the woods was special to them. And then he would get this look of terror, clam up, and change the subject. He used to have a house in the immediate area and said strange things happened. There was something bad around the house, something in those woods. He said that their house mysteriously burnt down one day when no one was home. They had rebuilt it, and it caught fire and burnt down a second time while no one was home. Whatever happened spooked him so much that they bought a new home miles away. And he was spooked to even think about it. When locals told me of the Native Americans, who were reportedly shapeshifters, I began researching and learned that many tribes had beliefs in dark magic that would allow them to transform, much like a skinwalker. These rituals are always dark rituals that involve blood, sacrifice, or something other evil or dark deed. After that, I just stayed completely out of the woods around my house, and I didn't walk further than the barn behind the house at night. There will still be several incidents. More loud, piercing screams at night. Once or twice I heard a baby crying in the woods during the middle of the night. As I thought to myself, that's no baby. Something is trying to lure me out there or screw with me. The sound changed from that very distinctive sound of a baby into something wicked and unnatural, almost like an evil, twisted mockery of sound of the baby crying. I felt that it was literally trying to mess with me, trying to install terror and let me know that it was there. One time I had to talk to my brother and a friend out of going into the woods to look for the baby. And again, as soon as everyone agreed that there could not possibly be a baby crying in the woods in the middle of the night, the sound changed into something wicked, which would curdle your blood. There was also another occasion when we heard puppies crying out from the woods. In the middle of the night, once again, a couple of friends wanted to rush out and rescue the puppies, and once again, as soon as I pointed out that it could not be puppies in the woods in the middle of the night, the sound changed, and it always had this wicked, terrifying sound, almost like something evil was trying to create the most disturbing sound it could. Shortly after this, I moved away and rarely visited home, and all of my encounters of this nature ended when I left. Years later, that house was sold. All right, so this experience happened in the panhandle of Florida, which Native American tribe would be the Seminole. I did a little research on this creature that it may be, and it's called the Hutchko Chopko, which means the long ear. And long ear is a hairy wolf-like monster of Seminole mythology. It's usually described as being 4-footed, the size of a donkey, with a wolf's head and pointed ears. That's about as much info that I could get on this. The Seminole also have like a trickster rabbit. But the long ear is what really kind of struck me as maybe being this creature. Just found it interesting and kind of wanted to give you guys a name for it. I really like how this guy mentioned that other Native American tribes have their own version of the skinwalker or shapeshifter. Navajo are the only tribe that have the skinwalker, the Yenadalushi, which some people disagree with, because of TikTok, Reddit, and Hollywood. But it's a Navajo lore. It's the Ye Nadalushi is Navajo lore, meaning skinwalker. All other tribes, not all, but the majority of other Native American tribes have their own shapeshifter. Just because they have their own shapeshifter doesn't mean that's called a skinwalker. It's just the Navajo lore. They all have different names. Ojibwe, bearwalker. This long-ear creature, Kochkochopko, which is very similar to what this guy describes. A hairy wolf-like monster, described as 4-footed, the size of a donkey, meaning quadruped, the size of a donkey with wolf's head and long pointed ears. Crazy. Anyway, just wanted to kind of pop that in here. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right, folks, very frightening and intriguing experience. Let's jump into today's video evidence that when I saw it immediately shocked me, and I knew immediately that I had to share it with you. Let's get into it.
But I want you to know, these vats with these different giants in them are, as was described to me by an insider in the intelligence community when he said, I saw the half-human animal hybrids in cages, and they were crying out to me, help me, I'm human. He said, Steve, only part of them was human. I'll tell you what, it's tough to live with that.
Take the place apart. There's no smell of what we are doing. Recently, some disturbing images have been leaked showing the horrifying alien biogenetic experiments in the top secret underground dust space. Located almost 2 miles between Gov'T and Mesa on the Chicala Apache Indian Reservation near Dawson, New Mexico. This installation is classified so secret, hardly anyone knows of its existence. Anyone who talks about it die in mysterious circumstances or have a complete personality change and retract their statements and say they made it all up. Insiders and else report many bizarre horrific experiments, so sick it's hard to believe. If you condemn me thoroughly and call me the Antichrist or whatever you want to call me, it's not going to hurt me. It's going to hurt you.
As more and more conspiracy theories are in fact turning out to be conspiracies themselves, it's time to penetrate the inner sanctum. It's time to penetrate the inner sanctum. It's time to penetrate the inner sanctum.
Most humans that were there were evolutionary slaves. This process was perfected in the world's largest and most advanced biogenetic research facility in Los Alamos. They are implanted and controlled at a distance through low radio frequency transmissions, thus ensuring a high level of secrecy. This is Earth's first joint United States government and alien-grade biogenetics laboratory. Others now exist across America, in Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona. The multi-level facility in Dulles goes down for 7 levels and is reported to have a central hub, which is controlled by base security. The level of security required to access different sections of biases is what goes further down the facility. There are over 1,000 secret exits here and around Dulles. Many around Argola and Mesa, others to the south of Mount Dulles Lake. Deep sections of the complex connect into vast tunnel systems that crisscrosses America, linking all the facilities.
Can you believe this?
experiments. By the 60s, the rate was speeded up and they began getting careless and self-involved. By the 70s, their true intentions became very obvious, but the government still kept covering up for them. By the 80s, the government realized there was no defense against the craze. This installation is classified so secret, hardly anyone knows of its existence. Anybody who talks about it die in mysterious circumstances, or have a complete personality change, and retract their statements, and say they made it all up. Most humans that work there are cloned human slaves. Biogenetic research has been going on for years at those labs. Level 6 is known by employees as Nightmare Hall. It holds the major genetic labs adults. Insiders adults report many bizarre horrific experiments, so sick it's later than humans, half human, half fungus, swim about, in vast tanks, thousands of human insectoids, with segmented bodies, right about, in huge tanks. There are reptilian humans that can cling to vertical walls, rats with human faces, and ants, monkeys with insect hands that cry like babies, also huge mixtures of cross-species, hybrid alien humanoids in cages. There are fish, monkeys, birds, and rats so cross-bred that they can barely be considered those species anymore. There are hundreds of cages with red humanoid, grotesque bat-like creatures from 3 to 7 feet tall, and gargoyle-like beings called frequent vampire reptiloids. Many humans are also being implanted with brain transceivers and released back into the community. These act as telepathic communication channels and telemetric brain manipulation devices. This network was developed and initiated by NASA and controlled from the space station. It has worldwide coverage. Level 7 is even worse, row after row of thousands of humans and human transgenic mixtures in cold storage. Here too are embryo storage vats of humanoids in various stages of development. Here many abductees are kept in small cages, unable to stand and hardly able to move, dazed and drugged, crying and begging to be killed. We were told embryo must be insane and involved in high-risk drug tests to cure insanity. We were told to never try to speak to them at all. In the beginning we believed its story. Finally, in 1978, a small group of workers discovered the truth. It began the Dose Wars. Biogenetic research has been going on for years at the Dose Labs. Level 6 is known by employees as Nightmare Hall. It holds the major genetic labs adults. Insiders adults report many bizarre horrific experiments, so sick it's hard to believe. Schools of multi-limbed humans, half human, half octopus, swim about in vast tanks. Thousands of human insectoids with segmented bodies, right about in huge vats. There are reptilian humans that can cling to vertical walls, rats with human faces and hands, monkeys with insect heads that cry like babies, also huge mixtures of cross-species, hybrid alien humanoids in cages. There are fish, monkeys, birds, and rats so crossbred that they can barely be considered those species anymore. There are hundreds of cages with winged humanoid, grotesque bat-like creatures from 3 to 7 feet tall, and gargoyle-like beings called vampire reptiloids. Many humans are also being implanted with brain transceivers and released back into the community. These act as telepathic communication channels and telemetric brain manipulation devices. This network was developed and initiated by NASA and controlled from the space station. It has worldwide coverage. Level 7 is even worse, row after row of thousands of humans and human transgenic mixtures in cold storage. Here too are embryo storage vats of humanoids in various stages of development. Here many abductees are kept in small cages, unable to stand and hardly able to move, dazed and drugged.
I'm here to offer you and me an opportunity to know the truth. So if you can connect with it at any level, then you might survive the respaning or the recycling that is about to occur, the evolutionary level above human.
All right. So, like I had said in the live stream Saturday night, there was some very disturbing photos in this and some very disturbing details. There's one photo that it's kind of blurry, but it really does resemble that of a Dogman. And I am really not above the belief that the military and the alien agenda, whether they be from a different dimension, different whatever planet, wherever they're from, they are alien to this planet, have worked together to create monstrosities. I'm not saying that Bigfoot and Dogman are created by these creatures, all of them. Maybe the Dogman is an alien as well, you know. I know that I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how supposedly back some time ago an alien craft had crashed here, and they enslaved human beings to dig for gold, for fuel for these aliens, to, you know, for their ship. And then we were talking about, hey, you know, what if, because as humans we were like too weak to constantly work, you know, 24/7 or however long, they created a race, the Bigfoot race. Who knows? You know, just theory, right? And he said, that's pretty crazy. I never thought about it like that. And I said, you know, just an idea, a theory I've kicked around for a while. But, you know, we as humans are almost instinctually know gold is of value. And it's maybe in our DNA to know that. You know, just like we still have nightmares, and children still can recall nightmares of seeing like a werewolf-like creature or a hairy Sasquatch-looking creature from their dreams, but have never seen a movie of these creatures or never heard mention of them. But it's something retained in our DNA from thousands and thousands of years ago when we were hunted down by these creatures. The bottleneck of the human race, it was so small at one point, we were almost wiped out to nothing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm probably not even making sense, but to me it makes sense. I'm not saying that the government at all created these creatures. I'm saying there's obviously the government is creating creatures that are monstrosities, but, you know, I can't say for certain 100% that these things were created by the agenda and the government, because the government was, you know, not as strong as they are now, and probably not who they are now, whatever. But it just, I don't know. Now I'm definitely not making sense. I hope that you guys can see what I'm trying to say here. And it's theory. It's just all theory, you know, just like the field of cryptozoology is theory, because we have no definite proof. There are people out there that, you know, will have their own theory and call that proof, but I don't. And I think everyone's theory is valuable. But theory is not proof, and a belief is not proof either. So anyway, guys, with that, thank you for supporting this channel. Your support is what makes this channel special, and which keeps it growing and going, which is so appreciated. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your family, and friends. Share a little bit of this information that we share on a daily basis here on this channel with the ones that you love, and you may just save their life someday. God bless you all.